So Carter, what's GRA's value proposition?
Our value proposition is that we turn our customers' supply chains into a competitive advantage.
And how do you deliver on that?
The short way of answering that is that we work with you until sustainable results are delivered. How do we do that? The first way in which we do that is find optimal options with a blend of experienced strategic thinking and also detailed data analysis. The second way that we do that is very carefully and consciously engage with the team and the culture of the business to ensure that whatever options that we agree to take forward are actually owned by the team and they feel it's their world, their decision, and have the passion and buy-in that's required to make sure that's sustainable into the future. And the third way that we do that is we work side by side with our clients, both at the operational and the management or executive levels, to ensure that the new behaviors are adopted, embedded, and by the time that we start to pull back, the business sees it as, this is the way that we do things around here. So it's sustainable, it's owned, and again, we can always go back to the original business case to make sure that we're on track.
Carter, can you tell me a little bit more about some of the areas that GRA work in?
At a high level, I'd say that we work in supply chain and procurement, strategy, planning, and execution. So breaking that down a bit more, so strategy is really around it's the network design and planning. So what sort of supply chain do we want to have globally and or locally? What are the factors that influence that? How do we make sure that's resilient, it's optimized, and actually provides for some resilience in the future as well? We also do a lot of work in insourcing, outsourcing decisions. So what do we need to have internally? What can be outsourced as appropriate? We also do work in procurement strategy and strategic sourcing. So I gave some examples of that before. And also do a lot of work in the organizational design. So again, what sort of organizational capabilities and structures are required to deliver the new way? Because it's one thing to design it, it's another thing to live it. So we have to be very conscious of both the strategic view, the business case, the network structures, and also the people and process capabilities required to deliver that. The second area that we work in is what we'd call planning. So once we have a clear picture of what the supply chain needs to look like, we then have to plan the activity on it. And that really lives in areas like S&OP, integrated business planning, demand planning, inventory optimization, replenishment planning, and from a procurement perspective, also the category planning. And so again, what we're doing here is we're trying to optimize the decisions we're making about what needs to go where and when. So again, to minimize the amount of inventory, maximize the service level, and also make sure that there's cost efficiencies. The third area that we work in terms of those levels is the execution area. And execution here is once we've planned our network and we know what it looks like, we've got the activity profile. What are the things that we're going to do to make sure that happens? And so that's really around warehousing. So it could be warehouse design, construct. It could be all of the warehousing practices and processes and technologies. So what's right to deliver that outcome and to make sure we can service the business efficiently and we have the right capacity. We also look at that in terms of transportation. So again, transportation management and planning, and some of that can tie back into the insourcing, outsourcing question. And there's also that piece on contract execution and contract management to make sure that everything that we're doing is aligned with the premise and the performance guarantees that we had in our procurement arrangements. If I then kind of look at the ways in which we engage, those are sort of the levels or the categories. The ways we engage is we can work on a professional services basis. Professional services means that we might have somebody working as a member of your team, if that's something that you want, in the business as part of the team on a full-time or otherwise basis to, again, build the capability internally and kind of create something that can be owned and handed over to the business over time. We also engage in an advisory or consulting capacity as well. And again, that's looking for opportunities, finding the options, and kind of figuring out that way forward together. We also have a benchmarking capability, and our benchmarking is a bit different because it's not just benchmarking of the financial and service outcomes. It does have that, but it also has some benchmarks around process performance. So we can start to make that correlation between processes and practices and outcomes, and that's quite powerful to see. We've also got a training and education business called Supply Chain Business Institute, and we do individual tailored courses for organizations. We do mentoring programs for people in the business that you want to build capabilities within, and we also do public best practice short courses in a variety of topics as well, which are very well attended. The last sort of category is systems. We believe technology is quite essential in supply chain, so we use technology to support over a lot of our analysis work and also to implement within businesses to increase capability. And some of those systems include GAINS, which is a best practice demand inventory optimization replenishment planning system. Also has neural network and artificial intelligence capabilities, which is very powerful, and it's kind of a new leading edge capability we're seeing in the market. We also work with JDA, which is a broader suite, also has forecasting and planning, but a lot in the network strategy and design. We've done some work with LlamaSoft as well, which is also network design and strategy. We've got a relationship with Zycus, which is a sort of a large-scale procurement platform, and a variety of other tools. We've got some in-house tools we've developed, and we've also worked with most of the major, well, actually all of the major ERP systems in quite a deep way, and a lot of the other best-in-class or best practice systems.
Well, thank you, Carter. Can you give me an example of some of the industries that GRA work with, and maybe some examples of some clients that you've worked with?
We work in a variety of industries, and at one stage I would have said we largely work with capital-intensive businesses. That's not so much the case anymore because we've been doing a lot of work in organizations that are more process-based or service-based. So it might be the Australian Electoral Commission, that's the whole secure logistics piece around the balloting. We've done some work with KinCare, which was an in-home aged care health provider, and that was really looking more at a people capability supply chain, so it's certainly broadening. If I go back to some of the core industry sectors, one would be retail, and some of the key clients in the retail sector would be Woolworths, Metcash, Aldi, 7-Eleven, The Reject Shop, Officeworks, Pepcor, which is Hair Scarf and Best and Less, and Colette, which is a fast fashion business. The reason why I've named those is because it's one thing to say retail, but are we talking about fresh food? Are we talking about auto parts? Or are we talking about fast fashion? They all have very different characteristics, and there's some similarities as well. But again, it's a broad range of different retail organizations we've worked with within that sector. So another sector that we work in is manufacturing and distribution. Again, it's one thing to call it an industry sector. There are differences within each sector. So we've done a lot of work with the FMCG businesses. We have a partnership with the AFGC as well, the Australian Food and Grocery Council. But some of our specific clients include Simplot, Lion Dairy and Drinks, Fonterra, and that can go across to some of the more heavy industrial type businesses such as, say, Laminex, Nuplex, and some of the major steel companies. And I'll put Aurora in the mix as well, the old Amcor business. The next sector is mining and resources. That has a sort of a different focus. So if I look at retail and manufacturing and distribution, it's very much focused on the product. With mining and resources, it's often aftermarket or more of the services that are provided. So one of those, or a few of those organizations are Coastal Oil Logistics, Rio Tinto, and Queensland Nitrates. So the next sector that I'll name is health and pharmaceuticals. I think there's a theme emerging here. It's one thing to say the sector, but again, there are differences within the sector. We've worked with a number of the pharmaceutical suppliers. So Symbion Pharmacy Services has been a very long-standing client. We've done some work with Sigma, CH2, Clifford Hallam Healthcare, which is a wholesale supplier to the hospitals. We're also doing some work currently with New South Wales Pathology, and also KinCare, and I've mentioned KinCare before. KinCare is an interesting one because it's not a standard product supply chain, it's a services supply chain, and the question was how to optimize and plan and match the right skills with the care requirements in that sort of organization, and we see that as a growing opportunity in the sector, simply because of the demographics of Australia. So another sector that we've had a long-standing relationship with is defence and government. Have worked with the Australian Defence Forces pretty much since the inception of GRA about 23 years ago, so a very long-standing relationship there and very broad. We've also more recently done some work with Australian Border Force, and we also have an arrangement with Talos, which is a defence industry supplier back to defence, where defence has asked them to take over the maintenance and management of some of the equipment they supply to defence, and we're in partnership with Talos doing a lot of the planning work, supply chain planning work associated with that on a full-time basis. So that's quite exciting. We see that as a growing area of the business. We're also doing quite a bit of work with Sydney Trains, and I think I mentioned before the Australian Electoral Commission, and that's around the secure balloting and processing centres for the ballots. So the last industry sector I'll name is Automotive, Aerospace and Rail. Look, there's lots of other industry sectors I could name, but I'm just trying to consolidate to a handful for brevity's sake. These types of supply chains aren't primary product supply chains, so it's not a product going to a customer. These tend to be more what we call MRO, or maintenance, repair and overhaul, heavy asset, and it's really more focusing on the consumables, repairables, erodables, and spare parts that support a infrastructure network. So one of our clients in that space is Horizon, which used to be the freight part of Queensland Rail. So there's been a whole lot of work there around procurement, supply chain strategy, and planning capability. And again, that's all for the service parts and the service supply chain to support that infrastructure network. We've also done a lot of work with Qantas. So again, that's the consumables, rotables, and spare parts for the aircraft. That's looking at the supply chain network, again, the planning of those parts and also the warehousing components. Another organization we've worked with in that space is BAE Systems. So again, one of the defense providers providing equipment, and again, looking at that support component. And if then I move more into the kind of the consumer space, we've done a lot of work with some of the automotive suppliers like Honda Australia and Renault Nissan, typically focusing on the customer service division, which is again all the aftermarket componentry and support as well.
Well, Carter, thank you very much for your time today.
It's been my pleasure, Dan. Thank you for your time.